let his praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises that cannot fail, when the howling storms of doubt and fear assail. By the living word of God I shall prevail, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises I now can see, perfect present cleansing in the blood for me. Standing in the liberty where Christ makes free, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises I cannot fall, listening every moment to the Spirit's call, resting in my Savior as my all in all. Standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. I'm standing on the promises of God.
Good evening, everyone. Please confirm I can be heard. Okay, thank you. I think that's confirmation. Welcome to our program for this evening. We continue our leadership series, and just like Brother Daniel has mentioned, our focus this evening will be on managing workplace conflicts positively. I don't know if Ebenezer is sharing the slides yet. Please, can anyone confirm? Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, not just hear me. Can you see the slides, please?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Is Ebenezer here? I apologize. I think that's very necessary before we go on. I can share that with. All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. So our topic for this evening is managing workplace conflicts positively, and I deliberately underlined positively to help us understand that we can manage workplace conflicts, but not necessarily positively. So the emphasis this evening is not just on managing workplace conflicts, but as well managing it the right way, managing it positively so that we can get the results at the end of the process. I have 45 minutes. I'll try to run as quick as possible because I believe we would benefit more from having people share their experiences on how they have managed workplace conflicts as against just going through the slides that you can as well read online. So I'll quickly define, this is the outline. Before I define conflicts, we should understand that even before the creation of man, there has always been conflict. And in Revelation chapter 12, it tells us about the war in heaven. Michael the archangels and his angels he commanded went against the dragon and his angels as well. So even before the creation of man, we've always had conflict. What does the Bible tell us about conflict as children of God? What should be our stand with respect to conflict? I have just picked a few Bible verses that I'll quickly run through, and it should help us understand what our standpoint should be as children of God, as Seventh-day Adventists with respect to conflict, whether it be workplace conflicts or in our homes or in church, wherever it is. The Lord expects us that as long as it depends on us, we should live at peace with everyone. That's in Romans chapter 12, verse 18. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And then Hebrews 12:14 says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And then Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, sons and daughters of God. And Romans 14:19 says, so then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. And finally, in Genesis chapter 13, verse 8, the story of Abraham and Lot, he says to Lot, let there be no strife between you and me, and between your headsmen and my headsmen, for we are kinsmen. So we can see that the Bible preaches that we should push for peace at all times. And in some cases, it says as far as it depends on us. And I was mentioning earlier, there are several examples, even before the creation of man, where we have had conflict. Apart from the conflict in heaven, even when man was created, we had conflicts right from the Garden of Eden. We could see conflict between brothers, between Cain and Abel, that led to the death of one brother. And also we have Isaac and the Ishmaelites. And what exactly was the issue? It was about wells of water. And how did they resolve this? Isaac and his servants had to leave the conflict. They had to move and dig more wells. And then the enemies claimed the wells that Isaac had dug. But we know the story, God blessed Isaac several folds. And then we have Joseph and his brothers. What exactly was the issue? It was jealousy, it was envy, and then we had physical and emotional abuse of one brother. And how was this resolved? Joseph forgave his brothers. We have that in Genesis chapter 37. And then we have Paul and Barnabas. This was in the church, so to speak. And what was the issue? It was disagreement about taking Mark along on the missionary trip. And how did they resolve this? They decided to go their different ways. That's in Acts chapter 15. And then in the book of Philemon, we have the issue between Philemon and his servant Onesimus. Onesimus probably couldn't keep up with the pressure. Maybe he had told Philemon he could work under pressure. But when the pressure was too much, he ran away. And how was this resolved? Philemon accepted him back when he returned, and Paul acted as the mediator. So at times we would need someone to mediate between us and whoever it is we're having issues with. And then we have the story of Jacob and Laban. And what was the issue here? Deception, mutual distrust. And how was this resolved? Jacob and Laban agreed to parting ways. We have that in Genesis chapter 30 and chapter 31. So let's try and define conflict very quickly. And like I said, I would run through this so that we can have more time to share personal experiences. This evening, we're talking about workplace conflict, but it's important for us to define conflict generally. It's the result of opposing thoughts, actions, ideas, interest, and then it disrupts the status quo. Also, you can define it as a clash between individuals arising out of a difference in thought process, in attitude, in understanding. And then it's also a struggle between individuals or groups that possess opposing goals. Your values are different, your beliefs are different, and so that would cause conflict. And we are made to understand that all interactions, all relationships include the possibility of conflict. It's not limited to the workplace. So like I mentioned earlier, it can be at home. This applies, although the presentation tonight is about workplace, but I mean this applies across board. It applies in our homes, in our workplace, in our neighborhood, even in church. So can this universal definition of conflict be applied to the workplace conflict as well? Well, not entirely, because the workplace is quite unique. You can go to the next slide. So the workplace is dynamic because, as we would all agree, especially in a place like Lagos, for some of us, our workplace has become our second home. If you do the math, you would find that if you take out the time you use commuting, I'm talking about Lagos here because that's our reality for most of us here online. If you take out the time you spend commuting to work, you would find that you probably spend more time at work than you spend at home. And if you take out the weekend, I mean, the reality is staring in the face that you spend very likely, depending on the kind of work you do actually, you just might be spending more time at work than at home. That is why it's very important for us to address workplace conflict. You don't want to spend a greater time of your life in a place where you're continually at loggerheads with a team member or with your boss or with a customer or with a supplier. So again, why is workplace conflict unique? Because so many of us don't love our jobs. We just keep these jobs because we need to survive. So it's a double whammy, so to speak. Number one, you don't like the job, and then you have to deal with conflicts on that job. So the pressure is just enormous. In fact, that if you had an alternative, you'd rather be at home, but you don't have a choice. You have to work because you have to put food on your table. So you can deal with that alone as against having to combine dealing with conflicts in a place you are not necessarily happy to be. And then again, we do not get to choose our colleagues. It would have been much better. It would have been a saner climb if I could sit down and tell my employer, these are the guys I want to work with. But of course, you don't have that privilege. You just get to work one day and they tell you these are your colleagues or these are your team members and all of that. These are your bosses. So you don't get to choose. And then again, most of us work in places where there's some level of interdependence with one another. So you have to rely on a colleague to get your job done or to get the job done. And so the inefficiency from one colleague will tell on your own performance. It is just like a tug of war. We've all been part of that sport or game at some point. If we're not pulling in the same direction, then there's a problem. Or it's like a chain. It says you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if there's one person who is not pulling his weight, if there's one person who likes to, what's the word? If there's a freeloader in your team, then there's every likelihood that you're not going to enjoy work. And then finally, like I've mentioned, workplace conflict is unique because, yes, you don't get to choose your colleagues. And very likely your colleagues have different personalities from different cultures, different styles. And it just makes it a recipe for disaster, so to speak, because you're likely going to have personality clashes, a clash of ideas, and if not properly managed, I mean, it can turn the business upside down or it can turn your career upside down. So I mean, this applies to people who own their own businesses, whether you run your own business or you work in an organization. If you run your own business, I think the stakes are even higher because if you're running a business where your employees are constantly at war, it will very likely affect productivity. And in turn, that will affect your profitability. It's only a matter of time it begins to affect your balance sheet, it begins to affect your cash flow, and then the sustainability of your business. Because if you have workers who are constantly at war and then maybe a high turnover because people can't stand it and they leave and you employ someone else and they are constantly going against each other, It's only a matter of time before you'd have to close shop, except you can do the business, run the business all by yourself. And if you work in an organization as an employee, if you are constantly at war with your colleagues, there is every likelihood that it will affect your progress, your promotion in your place of work. So these are the reasons why workplace conflict is seemingly different from just conflict in general or conflicts at home, and why we have to deal with it in a unique way. I'm going to quickly share something on the chat, and I want everyone to participate. What conflict animal are you? It'll probably take you just about 2 minutes to click and find out, and it will help us along the way as we look at how to manage workplace conflict. The kind of animal you are will tell you how you'd likely handle conflict you are faced with at work. Just a second, I should have shared this earlier. Confirm you can see it. Can anyone confirm? I've shared this in the chat to everyone.
Yes.
So as I proceed, just take your time, 2 minutes to feel this and tell in the chat as well what kind of conflict animal you are. And then I can tell you what that represents, and to give you an idea why you act the way you do in the face of conflict. So I'll go on, and please just type your result. It'll be interesting to see what kind of animal you are. So what are the types and causes of workplace conflicts? 2 different categorizations here, and I find the 2 of them useful, and they also speak to each other. On the left, you have one I nicked off Harvard Law School, and then the other from a career guide I found online as well. For the Harvard Law School, they are divided into 3 types. You have the task conflict, you have the relationship conflict, and you have the value conflict. And I think by just by their names, you can tell how they'll be defined. For the task conflict is related to, your work assignments. If you are in a project team to deliver a certain job, and there are different ideas how you could get this done. It's quite subjective. So the conflict will arise from, like I said, how should we go about this? How should we apportion resources? And all of that. And it may appear to be the simplest kind of conflict to resolve, because it's probably, I feel 1 + 1 should be 2. But my colleague feels it should be 1 + 0.5 + 0.5. The result is the same, but we just have different ideas on how we should get there. So ordinarily, that should not be a problem if both members of the team can demonstrate that the result at the end of the day is the same. Maybe one is a longer route. Why not just do 1 + 1, which would give you 2, rather than go from 1 to 0.5 to another 0.5 to get to 2. If you sit down and trash this out, eventually you find that there's really nothing to go back and forth about. But the problem with task conflict is it could tell that there might be deeper issues other than just what appears to be on the surface. And if you cannot agree on whether it is 1 + 1 or 1 + 0.5 + 0.5, then there is something else to it. There are deeper underlying issues more than just how to achieve results. And in our places of work, you can easily tell when you're at loggerheads with someone on something that looks very simple, but you guys keep going back and forth, or one person keeps going back and forth. For example, there are people who they don't have a different opinion on how something should be done. But as soon as you have an opinion, they just don't agree that's how it should be done. And if you ask, what is your suggestion or what's your opinion on how this should be done? They've not thought it through. They don't have an alternative. They just don't agree with you. And when that's recurring, then you know there's a problem. That is not just a task. There's more to this than just task conflict. When someone just doesn't agree with your ideas. And then there's a relationship conflict, which is arising from differences in your personality, in your style. People who would not ordinarily meet in real life, like I said, are often thrown together and they must try to get along. So there are certain people who have personality that you just cannot stand. Maybe you feel there's an air of arrogance around this person. What's this person even feeling like? So it's not just about the work anymore. Or there's someone you feel talks too much. He's the most vocal person in the room or in a meeting, or he has to have the last word. So it's not just about the task. Now it's about the person's personality that you just cannot stand. Maybe the person is just too quiet. The person looks too slow. And you just can't stand slow people. Or you just don't like the person's face. Yeah, I mean, most of us might probably have encountered experiences like that. Maybe not you, or might be colleagues, who someone else, maybe the boss cannot just stand because for some reason I just don't like this person. And then we have the value conflict. This is as a result of fundamental differences in your identity, in your values, which can include differences in politics or religion or your ethics or your deeply held beliefs. I'm sure many of us can also relate to this. There are people who just cannot stand you at work because you are a practical Christian, not just on paper. Or who cannot stand you because of politics, maybe not quite in Nigeria. Yes, it's becoming something in Nigeria, but in much more developed democracies where you can tell someone who is on the right or who is on the left, maybe based on their stance on immigration or abortion or LGBTQ. If you put someone who is on the extreme right with someone who is on the extreme left, and you have to have them work together, as long as they wear their politics proudly like a badge, it might be difficult to have them work together in the same space. Maybe it's not that deep in Nigeria yet, but I mean, we also have colleagues who are openly supporting one particular political party and this person supports the other political party. And of course, that will lead to conflicts in the place of work. And then to the right, we have maybe in finer detail types of conflict we encounter at work, and maybe we might relate with the one on the right better than the one on the left. We have interdependence conflicts, that is challenges between team members if someone does not complete their task or when two people disagree on the task involved. A clear example is where you have, say, a report due by the end of the week. So your report is due on Friday. However, you have to wait on a colleague in maybe another department to give you data to complete your report. But because no one is going to hold this other colleague accountable, he doesn't care whether he gives you the data you need on Thursday night, or whether he gives it to you on Friday morning, or whether he doesn't even give it to you at all. And then you have a boss who does not want any excuses. So you cannot go to your boss and complain, oh, Mr. X did not give me the data I needed or the information I needed, so I couldn't complete the reports as when due. It's affecting your own appraisal, but your colleague doesn't care. It doesn't affect him. Of course, this will lead to a conflict because it will now seem as though that colleague is a weapon fashioned against you. And then we have leadership conflict. Some of us here online are heads of departments, managers, senior managers in our places of work. And different leaders have their unique leadership styles and their communication styles as well. And some of your team members just do not understand you as a leader. Some of them cannot stand you. So how do you deal with team members who are unable to deliver or are not meeting your expectations? And it just seems that they don't understand what you want. How do you deal with that? Because definitely that will lead to conflicts between you, the boss, and your subordinates. And unfortunately, in Nigeria especially, there's a very fine line between just being a boss and being a bully. And we wear this leadership arrogance around, oh, I'm the boss here. So, I mean, it's a top-down approach. If I say this is how it's going to be done, then no questions, just go ahead and do it. If that is your leadership style, it is very likely that might not always work, and you'd always be at loggerheads with your team members. Well, I'll just talk about the conflict. We'll talk later on how to resolve. Then we have the working style conflict. I'm sure many of us can relate with, for example, you have a project that you're supposed to deliver at the end of, say, the month. Maybe I fall into the category of the team member who will say, oh, I have a whole month. Please, let's start talking about this in the last week of the month. Maybe I'm that kind of colleague. But you have another colleague who wants to set up a Teams meeting or a Google Meet meeting from the very first day that task was given, and have meetings probably every day of the week for 4 weeks to deliver the project. Some of us cannot stand that kind of colleague and would have issues because don't disturb my evenings or my breaks or my day with meetings for a project that is still due a month away. Whereas you have a colleague who doesn't want any sleepless nights, who wants to start doing maybe an hour every day and deliver it peacefully at the end of the month, like I said. Whereas you have me or another colleague who wants to do a crash work for 3 nights without sleeping and deliver the project. So that would lead to conflicts as well. And like I mentioned already, we have personality conflicts, which the Harvard Law School would refer to as relationship conflicts. Every individual has a unique personality that you can occasionally clash with in the workplace. Like I said, there are some people that are probably just too all over the place and you can't stand them. There are some people that just talk too much. There are some people that you feel are arrogant. You've never had a word with them. You've never had any close encounter with them, but just from a distance, you just feel this person is arrogant. And then the background-based conflict, which is also very similar to the value conflict. I mean, you work with different people from different parts of the country, or depending on where you are, from different parts of the world. Sometimes there's a culture shock. Sometimes there's like I said, maybe your politics or your religion, whatever it is can cause conflicts as well. I can see the answers. We have the compromising fox, we have the collaborating O. I would love to see more, please. We have the accommodating teddy bear. I'm not sure how many we are on the call, but please, as many as can. Just take your time to do this. You would probably find it interesting as we progress. You can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so how do you deal with conflicts? We've seen the types and causes of conflict. So go back 1 slide, please. So how do you manage conflicts? I'm not emphasizing on whether it's positively now, but how do you just generally manage conflicts? So one strategy is to force your way, is to compete. You force your way, compete. Just like we talked about leadership conflict. So let's say you have some kind of leverage over who you're conflicting with. Maybe you are the boss and whatever you say is final. So yes, you can force your way, you can compete and win. So you can use formal authority or other powers that you possess to satisfy your concerns without regard to the concerns of the other party. And that's the end. You have your way, and the conflict, so to speak, is resolved, right? I want this job done this way. No questions. Just go ahead and do it. And yes, your team members work together and deliver it just the way you like it. And the example is the leaders decide direction based on role, not facts or consensus. You're not calling any meeting to ask people what they think, how you should go about this. You just have an idea of how this should be done, and that's final. And again, why workplace conflict is unique is that if you try this in church, and I mean, we're all members of the same church. If you try this in church, whether you are the pastor, I mean, my apologies if this comes off the wrong way, whether you're the pastor or the first elder or you're the head of a department, people probably will not send you. Just decide not to do anything and there's nothing you really will do. But in your place of work, it's very different. It's an appraisal issue. If as a lead or a head of department or as a manager, I ask you to do this in a certain way and you don't do it, of course, when it's time to appraise you, I'll just state it there that X, Y, Z, and it might affect your career growth. So that's one way to manage a conflict. But don't forget, we're talking about managing conflicts positively. So I mean, you can judge for yourself. Is that a positive way of handling conflicts at your place of work? Then there's another strategy, which is accommodating. And your conflict animal will tell you whether you're likely to force your way or accommodate. So I think if you go through the conflict animal thing, it will tell you whether you are the accommodating teddy bear. I can see one accommodating teddy bear. So if you're accommodating, you just allow the other party satisfy their concerns and you neglect your own. That's another way. You want to go left, your colleague wants to go right. You're not bothered. Let's go right. You just move on. Even though it might take you more time going right than it will take you going left. But because you don't like wahala, you just simply go right. So you're unsure other options will work, but you're just being respectful. Yeah, so that's the accommodating strategy to manage a conflict. Another way is to avoid not paying attention to the conflict and not taking any action to resolve it. You're afraid of losing your friend, maybe your colleague, in this case is your friend or your job. You don't have any energy for drama. So you just avoid the conflict quietly and let it pass. Another way is to compromise. You attempt to resolve a conflict by identifying a solution that is partially satisfactory to both parties, not completely, but at least you meet each other halfway. So maybe, yeah, both parties are seemingly fine. So the problem with this, however, is that there might be a deadlock. You're neither going left nor right, but you have to decide which direction you are going. So you might need someone to mediate. You might need a third party to help make a final decision. So maybe you both have different ideas on how this should be done, but because you cannot agree, you both agree to go to the boss, and the boss decides what should be done, and you both move on. And the final strategy is collaboration. That's collaborating. And I can see many collaborating O's on the chat. So you cooperate with each other, you understand your concerns, you express your concerns, and you both find a solution, a mutually and completely satisfactory solution. It's a win-win for both parties. So there's a consensus, and then you work together to deliver whatever the objective is. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So this is how, from all I have researched, this is how to resolve a conflict positively. And you can see that if you look to your right, on the vertical axis, you have assertiveness. On the horizontal axis, you have cooperativeness. So depending on what animal you are, you want members of your team to be assertive and at the same time to be cooperative. And that's the collaborating O. That's what you have to the top right, where you are assertive, you know what you want, but all the same, you are willing to cooperate and also listen to the other party who also knows what he wants, and you can find a win-win solution. So has a good mark on the assertiveness and has a good mark on the cooperativeness. You can also see the competing persons who are at war. You can see it like a tug of war. So they are both assertive, but they are uncooperative. They both know what they want, which direction they want to go, but they're not willing to collaborate. I insist you must go right, and the other person insists we must go left. So they are both competing. And if one person is the boss and decides we are going left, you don't have a choice, you're going left. So that person can win because they have some form of leverage. I mean, that's the person who decides whether you're not coming to work the next day, whether you are fired. Or that's the person who decides whether you are promoted at the end of the fiscal year. That's the person who decides whether you are getting a bonus. That's the person who decides whether you are getting a pay rise. So if the person says you're going left, even if you have the courage to speak up and say, I think we should go left, eventually, if the person decides we are going right, then you are going right. You can also see the compromising, which is staying somewhere in the center. You are neither cooperative or assertive. You're just somewhere, or you're partially cooperative, partially assertive rather, and you're just somewhere in between. And then you have the avoiding, which is the worst. Avoiding, which is the worst. You're not assertive, you're not cooperative, you're just going to avoid the situation. With people like that in your team, when they are forced to be assertive, you won't find them. Or when they have to be cooperative as well, you won't find them. They won't stand up to be counted because they just don't have it. They would rather just run away, and they cannot be leaders because they're too cowardly to make a decision. They would rather just hide behind someone else. And if you have that kind of leader, it just means that the team will be in disarray because you have a leader who cannot say exactly what he wants because he's avoiding conflict. And if you have that person as a team member, there's a problem because the person will not say exactly whether he wants to go left or go right. The person will not just show up and be part of the work, or will not just be committed to the work because they don't want any wahala. And then finally, you have the accommodating person. The accommodating teddy bear would cooperate, but it's unassertive. So whichever direction you turn the accommodating person, he would go. So today, if they decide we are going left, the accommodating person is going left with everybody. And if tomorrow they all decide we are going right, the accommodating person would also go right. That can as well be a problem. It's not how to resolve conflict. And so to the left, you can see the competing person always wants to win. Always wants to win. Whether it's in the interest of the organization or not, the person just wants to win. And then the collaborating person wants to find a win-win solution together. And then the compromising person just wants to find a middle ground. The avoiding person would delay as long as they possibly can. And if they can escape having been part of whatever it is that is leading to conflict, then they would escape it. They'll just hide themselves behind whatever it is, and they can delay or avoid altogether. And then the accommodating person will always yield to whichever argument. Like I said, left or right, they are fine. They just don't want any wahala as well. So if you know your conflict animal, you can tell where you belong here. And I think that would help you going forward. Resolving conflicts positively, like I said, it should be the collaborating person. It should be the collaborating O. You should be assertive. Yes, you know what you want. You know what you feel is the right thing to be done. But then you're willing to listen to another opinion and sit with someone, understand their perspective, and find a win-win solution. And that is the right way to resolve conflict. Next slide, please. I think I'm able to save some time. Okay, more insights to resolving conflicts positively. Number one is you should evaluate the situation. Assess the situation, consider whether is this conflict, does it need addressing, or it's just too, what's the right word? It's just too unimportant in the scheme of things to start addressing. You can't address every conflict in your place of work. Then when will you have time to do the actual work? So you have to evaluate the situation and decide, is this a non-issue that shouldn't even be brought up? And if you feel it's something that should be discussed, then you should think about, it's a scenario planning, so to speak. How would this person react if I come up with this issue and discuss? It will help you plan ahead of time on how you'd react to however this person reacts as well. So it can help you have a more productive and empathetic conversation. If you think this person will not find this funny, or you feel this person will be very remorseful, it will help you prepare. So you evaluate the situation properly before you go ahead and decide what to do. And you can choose when and where to address this conflict. Do you want to call a Teams meeting inviting everybody to the meeting? Do you want to invite your bosses, your superiors? Do you want to invite the MD into the meeting to discuss this? And just like I mentioned in the task conflict, so there are some times that you have this colleague who would just never turn in the information you need in time. Sometimes, like, my own place of work, you can decide to escalate and angrily type that email and copy his boss. Please, this report is due by blah, blah, blah. You are reporting him to his boss, so to speak, because his boss will see that he hasn't done what he's supposed to do, and maybe he will get in trouble, possibly. So you have to choose when and where you want to resolve the conflict. Do you want to call this person aside and just have a quiet discussion in a private location, far away from any third party? I think that's the right thing to do if that's the first time you're addressing this, and to give you and this colleague space to discuss your thoughts and resolve this conflict positively. If it is recurring, that is when you might need a mediator. That is when you might need to escalate. However, if it's something you are just addressing for the first time, then something you probably need to discuss privately, alone, with this person you're having issues with. Then the next thing is communicate clearly and calmly. Sometimes you are just so agitated, angry, that you're not able to communicate clearly and calmly when you have an issue with a colleague. If you are certain you cannot take a deep breath and communicate clearly and calmly, maybe you should take your time. Maybe you shouldn't rush to resolve the conflict. And that's why we say evaluate the situation. In resolving conflicts positively, more often than not, you shouldn't be impulsive. There's righteous anger, and we can see examples in the Bible. Like I mentioned, there was Michael and his angels responding to the devil and his angels as well by kicking them out of heaven. There was Jesus who flogged the people who were trading in the temple. There was Nehemiah who decided to address the rich who were taking advantage of the poor people in Jerusalem while they were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So yes, there might be that righteous anger where you want to rebuke someone immediately. Yes, there might be moments like that when it's important to address it there and then. Nonetheless, I would say more often than not, in addressing a conflict positively or in resolving a conflict positively, you should take your time. You should dispel all of the anger, all of the negative energy, so that you can communicate, like it says here, clearly and calmly. You try to express your points clearly and calmly, explain briefly what the conflict is and why you are meeting, and maintain a positive and open body language. It might just be, I mean, you are seeing things from different perspectives. And it's also important physically also that you are keeping an eye contact and you are not crossing your arms. This should tell you that it's better off you are resolving a conflict physically than over the phone or over any of our social media tools these days. As much as possible, you should be resolving a conflict physically and not over the phone, because the body language is also very important when you're resolving a conflict with a colleague. And also you should listen. Many of us struggle with this. Many of us struggle with this. We are on the defensive, so you're not going to allow your colleague land. You are going to counter as soon as you hear something you don't agree with. You immediately counter whatever it is. And then maybe the person is also in that mood who will not let you land as well, would also counter whatever it is you're saying. At the end of the day, you won't resolve any conflict. You would leave that place worse off than when you didn't even speak about it. So when you're resolving the conflict, it is very important that you listen, be patient, let this person speak, and where necessary, even confirm you that you heard right. Did you say this? Do you mean this? So that you are clear exactly what the issue is. But where everyone is trying to speak at the same time, you very likely will not resolve any conflict. And that is why I put listen with exclamation marks, because most of us struggle with this. Listen, allow the person speak. After sharing your own point of view, give the other person time to share their personal opinions. They may highlight a new perspective or solution. So listen attentively and ask questions to ensure you fully understand what your colleague is saying. And finally, collaborate to find a solution. So you can, if you've built an environment where everyone is now at ease, you have shared goals, you have shared objectives. At the end of the day, we are both trying to achieve the same thing. When that is clear and your body language is positive and you are listening to this person, then you can both sit down and agree on what's the way forward. How do we achieve this? And like you say, sometimes you might need to refer to company policy. Maybe two of you don't even have an opinion that would fly. If you read the company policies, it says you should go left. So whether one person is saying go south or go east or go west, if the company says, if the company policy is go left, then I mean, your conflict or your going back and forth is to no effect. So sit down, brainstorm, and agree on the way forward. And that is the way to resolve conflicts positively. That is the win-win solution for everybody. However, do not forget that conflicts are not necessarily only between colleagues. You might have conflicts with your customers. You might have conflicts with your suppliers. If you are a business owner, you might have conflicts with your bosses. It could be, but I think this applies generally to whoever it is. It doesn't have to be a team member. It doesn't have to be a subordinate or your bosses, but I think this applies generally. I don't know if I have any other slide, but I would love to do now. Next slide, please. All right. I would love that we share our thoughts. For as many of us as have been working in a corporate environment for as long, I know we have real life examples that we can learn from, or you have questions to ask, please. I think this is the point where we can learn practical examples. So I would yield the floor to anyone who has any thoughts to share, any example or any questions. Thank you very much. You can indicate by just showing your hands, and anyone can help me, please, if there's any hand raised. I think we still have a few minutes, so. All right, Emmanuel, go ahead. Thank you. Opening
All
the
right,
floor.
thank you very much, Brother Ope, for that very, very enlightening session. I think everyone needs to learn a lot from. I believe everyone must have learned a lot from this lesson. I just want to add one information that I think can help us all as leaders, and that is the place of prayer. Many a time, because of our expertise, our experience, we tend to neglect the role of prayer when resolving conflict. Um, I had a with my I had I've had a couple of experience with regards to resolving conflict, and one of the things that helped me is at the heat of the moment when I say a word of prayer, it helps. I don't know, the Holy Spirit has that way of reorganizing my thoughts such that at that time, it just helps me to take control, whether with a colleague, whether with a subordinate or people in higher leadership. So I think that we're in situations where you are expected to resolve conflict, just a word of prayer can help you in helping to shape. I mean, the Holy Spirit can help you to shape your thoughts, the way you communicate, such that that conflict is resolved rightly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I'm sorry, probably took that for granted. Yes, you should pray in evaluating the situation as well. As Christians, we should pray before you approach wherever it is you're trying to resolve a conflict with. Thank you very much for adding that, Emmanuel. Do we have anyone else who wants to contribute, share an experience, or ask a question? Elder Wright, yeah, thank you very much. Go ahead, sir, please.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much. I was just thinking of the workplace. You have a situation where camps, that's what I'm saying. Camps are built because departmental heads, divisional heads, they're at war with each other. And when camps are built, the leaders see loyalty as acceptance to belong to their camp. Now, so in resolving conflicts, I mean, what you said is very vital regarding assertiveness and cooperativeness. And of course, you have collaboration at the high points of both. But what you now find is that divide and rule tactic by the leaders could cause a problem where people become aggressive, and the essence of collaboration is distorted. What do you do in such situations where your guys, so to speak, belong to different camps? So people see the enemy is inside rather than outside. What do you do? Because you want to be in the right books of your guy. And yeah, it's unhealthy, I must admit. But the reality is that you have divide and rule in many organizations, the workplace. And this guy who doesn't have another job, he doesn't have that sort of income, things of school fees and all that stuff. And he or she now begins to align with the boss because of possible displacement and being ostracized. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Wright. I don't know, Daniel, is it a question as well, so that we can probably...
Yeah, it's a question.
Okay, so I'll just hold on to Elder Wright's question, and then Daniel, go ahead, so that we take all this together. Go ahead, Daniel.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to, ask. Thank you for the question. I wanted to ask if there's any advice you can give for like a downline in a situation where there are two so-called ogas, right, that are always going at it, right? Really, every meeting, they never want to accept each other's opinion, and they go at it to the extent that it gets, very heated. They are raising voices at each other. Is there anything that you could advise, like maybe a downline that you can do in that kind of situation? Because most of the time it's almost like you cannot see anything, or you cannot do anything, because it almost looks like if anything you see might come off as if maybe you are taking a side. Or is there anything that can be done or that can be said in that situation, where two of your bosses, and maybe there is no there in maybe in that meeting or in that gathering, there is no power that is maybe greater than those two bosses, and so to control the situation, right? So, and they are going at it with each other, because this is actually a personal experience that I'm sharing, and it's been going on and on for like that for a while in every of like our status meeting and update meetings and all. And these two bosses are always going at it and all of that, and there is nobody else like higher than them to control their temper or to control their opinions. Is there anything at downlines that you would advise in situations like that that you can do or that can be said, to help keep things together?
All right, thank you, Daniel. I think your question is very similar to Elder Wright's question as well. So before the Indidia family comes, I'll just try to address that. But I would love if any other person has something to say on these two questions, you're welcome to also answer. When you have two bosses who are going at it every now and then, and you are just a downline, like you said, Daniel, you're just a subordinate. First is to evaluate the situation, like we said. Understand the situation. Is this your conflict to resolve? Yeah, I mean, they say when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. If you want to attempt, I mean, this is just my own point of view. Of course, there's a place of prayer, like Emmanuel has suggested. So if you want to attempt to mediate, I would say, first of all, like I have mentioned, evaluate. Do you have a relationship with both bosses? And that's why it's very important as, workers in an organization to, as much as possible, reach across the aisle. Yes, you work for Team A, but there's nothing saying that the manager of Team B cannot be your friend, someone you talk to over lunch and just share ideas. You don't report to him. He's not going to appraise you. You don't need to, there's no psychophancy around it, but he's just someone you respect and you have a relationship with, probably have a relationship with his own subordinates as well. And maybe you also have a good relationship with your own boss. So even though you have to be very careful if you decide to mediate as a subordinate between two bosses. But if you feel strongly that this is affecting your career and you've prayed about it and you feel you should mediate, I would say outside of the workspace, and maybe preferably maybe during one of those events where everyone's guard is down, all those team bonding events, or maybe over lunch with the manager of Team A or Team B. If you have that relationship prior to that moment, you can find a way to address this without necessarily making it obvious that, oh, I'm loyal to my own manager, or I'm in one camp or the other. Some people can smell this from a mile away. They can tell if you have an ulterior motive. But if both managers can tell that this is just a young man who is trying to help for the progress or the productivity of the organization, they probably can tell, and they will not be witch hunted because, and you're not going to meet one to say, oh, guys, your fault. You shouldn't have said that. Why are you? You have to apply wisdom, and I would say, yes, pray about it. Be careful. Take advantage of the moment, or if you've had prior relationships with these bosses, yes, you can attempt. If you are not sure of this, my advice would be that you sit it out. Do not interfere. Yeah, that would be my candid advice. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything with respect to that question from Elder Wright and Daniel. If you're going to respond to this, you can just go ahead and unmute and speak, because I'll. All right, Stanley, go ahead, please.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good evening.
Now, pertaining the situation of two bosses and the whole conflict, and now my addition is like this. So we should all understand that first and foremost, there is no such thing. My opinion, from my observation of things, is there is no such thing as collaboration, right? There must be a compromise somewhere. So if two people are opposing, if there is conflict, right, concerning any matter in the first place, right, somebody must compromise. Now, collaboration is probably compromising together. That's literally that. Resolving conflict is all about compromise all the time. So you either stay off, or one person compromises, or both parties compromises. That's how it works. Now, when it comes to conflict between yourself and others, you understand, you've said your prayers and all that, you understand. If the Spirit leads you, you will not get to compromise easily, right? And He will eventually touch the other person to compromise. So conflict will always be resolved all the time. Then when it concerns other people, now it depends on how much, how involved you are or how close you are to them. So if it's something that affects you directly with them, then definitely when you pray about it, how to resolve it always comes out. That's like what I've experienced my entire life. So prayer always works. That's number one thing everybody has to have at the back of their mind. And number two, you should be ready to compromise. You should be ready to change your point of view. You should be able to see things from somebody. I think he spoke about it today. You need to see things. Sometimes the way we see things is not the way other people see things, which is definitely true. And you cannot make them see things the way you see it. Now, sometimes you can't still see things the way they say it. So the only thing that opens your mind is always prayer. So when you pray about it, solutions always come out. But always bear in mind, there must be compromise, no matter what it is. Collaboration, everything. If there is no compromise, then it's either you give up, which is you compromising, the other person gives up, which is the person compromising, or both of you will continue dragging it. So that's just all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Stanley. I will let I think maybe that's Henry. Brother Henry can speak. Okay. In the Deha family, you have your hand up.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening.
I want to ask if studying someone's behavior or studying someone's character has a place in conflict resolution, because sometimes the way you handle some circumstances is dependent on the person's behavior. I don't know, because some people say it doesn't. You just treat the matter the way it is. And others say you need to study this person so that you know the way you will interact with the person or pass an information to the person while you are saying something that is actually right or thereabout. But I don't know. I just want to bring it here. Let me know if there is actually a place for studying someone's behavior before you pass an information to someone, like trying to resolve a conflict with someone.
Okay. Does anyone want to react to that? So I don't speak all the time. So okay. Maybe I'll go with Sister Ruth first, then I can let. But Brother Henry, your question is noted. Maybe someone would answer in the course of their own speaking as well. Sister Ruth, please go ahead.
Okay, so my contribution is not necessarily to it's not necessarily to answer the question. I just wanted to I've been listening. Thank you, Brokwe, for this insightful session. Quite thought-provoking in a whole lot of ways. But I wanted to bring something that was shared in a testimony two Sabbats ago from a sister in church. I don't know how many of us remember how she said something has been bothering her at work. She talked about the gift of men. That's the gift of men. Something has been bothering her at work, and she did not know that right behind her desk was somebody who was cousin to the chief executive. And I just wanted to bring it to as a lesson in terms of conflict resolution. Like a lot of times, some relationships are not visible to us at workplace. And the best way to guard against them is possibly to mind our utterances. A lot of times, you save yourself a lot of troubles in keeping your not very positive opinion to yourself, because you never can tell relationships that within the workplace that are also very expanded outside work. I don't know whether that relates to bro Stanley's question about observing character, but like I said, I just wanted to remind us that question. Probably you, Brokwe, will throw more light on that concerning conflict resolution and also fostering better cordial or more positive relationship at work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Ruth. Of course, for people who, well, how do I say this? I mean, street parlance, people who talk anyhow, are very likely to be at conflict with not just one colleague, but several colleagues and your bosses. So, I mean, that advice is very apt. We, as Christians especially, not just anyone, but as Christians, we should mind our utterances. If you have something personal to say to someone, I think you can walk up to the person and say, oh, I think you should do better this way or that way. But in a public space, to just condemn people, and like you said, the cousins, I mean, the chief executive's cousin was listening, and you're probably speaking negative things about your CEO. You just never know. And sometimes it's not even maybe sometimes it's just, sometimes we've seen WhatsApp messages appear on social media of what someone said and that said. So if you have something personal, if you have a reservation about a colleague or a boss, it might be helpful to speak with that person. If you have the opportunity, if you have the access, speak to the person directly. And if it doesn't cost you anything, like Sister Ruth has said, you can as well just keep your mouth shut. Yeah, thank you very much, Sister Ruth. Elder Wright, please. Elder Wright.
So sorry. I wanted to respond to the question on studying people. I think it's such a critical point in conflict resolution within the ambit or within the context of emotional intelligence. You see, conflict resolution itself presupposes an understanding of the situation, an understanding of the individuals involved. Emotional intelligence covers self-awareness, who you are, and awareness of other people and how to deal with such people. I have my own views regarding compromise. I think one of the speakers mentioned compromise. Because compromise is almost like accepting something that is lower than your own standard. That is standard that you believe. Okay, let's go. Let's compromise. I'm not sure, I may be wrong, I'm not sure compromise is a good way of life. Maybe we just, okay, let's just keep quiet. Let's discuss this later. Maybe that's what it meant. But that's by the way. The critical thing is, the point about understanding other people is so germane, so fundamental, is so important in conflict resolution. Because emotional intelligence, which is sincerely stronger than mental intelligence, another form of intelligence apart from spiritual intelligence, is what makes you successful with people and relationships. You must study people. There are some people, I mean, we all know about the types of people in terms of aggressive, passive, assertive, introvert, extrovert, and all that. Some people have a fragile ego. Some people, they have such a thick skin. Some people have a complex. Some people are confident. Some people are, they just had a bad childhood. Some people are imposter. They have the imposter syndrome. Some people, they're just different kinds of people. And so there are some people that necessarily you would ignore. There are some because you just know where they're coming from. There are some people that you just immediately apologize. There are some people you apologize to, but you know that that's not the best way. So the ability to study people is one of the greatest elements of success in relationships. Different people, it's like different people, different strokes. And that the truth is, if you deal with people the same way, I mean, for those who have so many friends, you know that certain friends, you just keep quiet. You don't even argue with them. If you have a conflict, if you don't have a conflict, just keep quiet, because this particular person is so narcissistic that he or she may not even be willing to listen to any other person apart from his own voice. So I'm just trying to emphasize the fact that to be emotionally intelligent is to have self-awareness and then self-management, and to have social awareness and relationship management. So on one axis would be the awareness of who you are, because you yourself may be an aggressive person. I don't even say assertive, aggressive person. You may be totally uncouth, you may be totally impatient, you may be totally rude, unless you look at the mirror and you can see who you are and not put the blame on another person, you may not be able to resolve a conflict because you keep blaming the other person. You keep assigning faults to other people. But when you have you're emotionally intelligent, you can say, well, actually, maybe I could have handled that person properly. At the moment you start accepting where you've gone wrong, it becomes a lot easier for you to resolve conflict, I think. So, bottom line, let us all take time to understand. It was Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Effective People, that said, seek first to understand, and understand people before you're understood. Seek first. So even in a conflict, just ask people, so what's upsetting you? What have I done wrong? What are the issues here? What are the issues here? Can we resolve this? Seek first to understand. Don't assume that you know people and you know the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Wright. Just to add to Henry's question, sometimes it is not enough to study people from a distance. You might need to get closer, and like we have all emphasized, you pray and just look for an opportunity. Maybe it might be during lunch break. If this person is sitting eating alone and you feel there's been some tension between you two, it might be an opportunity to sit next to the person and probably just find something interesting to speak about. And there you can see where you have common ground and just build it from there. And then gradually, as you get closer to this person, you can understand the person better. I think it's not just easy to stay on your own and study someone. You probably might not get the true picture. So seek to get closer to people to understand them, and maybe by that you can understand why they act the way they do. Thank you very much, Elder Wright. Brother Innocent, Brother Israel, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, thank you, Brother Ope, for this amazing presentation. It actually teaches a lot and it's an eye-opener. Thank you. For me personally, I would rather prefer to avoid conflict completely than think of a way to manage it. And one of the tricks I've always used is to be open-minded and friendly. So every time people see me, they just see that guy who is open to approach or talk to or work with. So even when I have issues or deadline to meet, because I'm that friendly guy, people would just rather prefer to call me than send a mail. And even when you send a mail, I would rather just respond by calling you back and say, just, make fun out of everything that I find myself doing. And this has helped me in such a way that when somebody is intentionally bringing conflict to me, other person tell him that, that guy does not even deserve you bringing conflict to. He's not that person that is going to fight you. So don't bring it at all. And even when we find ourselves in toxic environment where everybody is just trying to play eye service game, we all know ourselves. Despite in toxic environment, we all know ourselves. So everybody looks out for that person who is friendly, who is easygoing, who is open, Christian minded. You won't go and meet that person for a fight. But sometimes when you're just uptight, when you're not, when you're just focusing and you're just not that person who opens up your mind or not friendly, not you. Sometimes you pass, you don't greet. Somebody will not intentionally say, that guy does not greet me. Let me look for his trouble. Such kind of environment where it really happens in work environment. For me, basically, I would say be friendly to everyone, even to your boss. I am so free with my boss that I discuss some issues and give him advice. And he looks at it and says, oh, this is very nice. But ordinarily, if I keep to myself and just do my work diligently, I will never have to give him some ideas that we can implement. So that's one thing I use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Innocent. I picked something from what you said. You are the avoiding turtle. You can't always avoid conflicts, even if you are a very friendly person, especially when you're thrust into leadership roles where you have to take a decision that might not sit well with a particular group or with a particular person, but you have to make a decision. You cannot outsource that. So maybe at some point in life, you might be able to avoid conflict, be the avoiding turtle. That's your conflict animal. But to grow over time, especially even in your organization, you'll be expected to make decisions or be part of activities where you cannot shy away from the conflict, and you would have to find ways to resolve this conflict. So you can't always avoid conflicts. And being friendly doesn't stop you from having conflict with people. It doesn't really. But thank you for your contribution as well. Elder Wright, you want to say something, please?
Yes, I just like to sort of I don't know, maybe I'm interpreting innocent statement in another way. If I understand it, what is saying or what it's trying to say is, I just remember what someone said. He said, "It can't hurt me easily." I think what he's trying to say, maybe it's not very friendly and all that, but you just have a principle of life that says, I am difficult to hurt. And I mentioned fragile ego, self-awareness. And in every relationship, sincerely, if you have a fragile ego, you get into conflicts easily. So what maybe Innocent is saying, I'm sorry, it's just that let's go through life. Maybe even apply the principle Jesus spoke about in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, pray for those who despitefully use you. Essentially, it's just saying, but not we use the word friendly. Maybe that's not what you really mean. But just overlook hurts. Overlook people who are out there to hurt you. Overlook, just move on. That's what Jesus said. Just move on. Pray for your enemies. Just move on. And what Innocent is saying, I think is powerful in the sense that, for instance, it's better for you to prevent hurt than trying to forgive. You know that? It's better for you not to be hurt easily than try to forgive someone. Do you know that? That's the truth of life. Just move on. Pray for that person inside of you. Just move on. So before it happens, you actually said, I'm forgiven. That is, I'm letting it go in advance of you hurting me. I know what I'm saying is very difficult, I know. But I'm trying to substitute another word for friendly. What innocent just means that he's in his spirit, in his mind. He's made up his mind that he will have good thoughts towards you, despite your evil thoughts towards me. And that is so fundamental and so strong point for minimizing, I won't say avoiding, minimizing conflict situations. And even when the conflict situation starts, you can reconcile faster if you are not deeply hurt. Or maybe the last point quickly. Okay, you also made a very strong point when you said we should try to, I don't know whether it is you or someone else says, try to move closer to that person. You see, the danger for conflict situation, I think it's when we act as mind readers rather than mind analysts. A mind reader, I can read what you're saying. I didn't want to think, I know. You're not reserving judgment. But when you analyze people over time, you reserve judgment. You don't jump to conclusions. So you become a mind analyst, I think, than a mind reader. You can't read people's minds, but because from their actions over time, for what they say, questioning them and all that, you may be able to know their intention. So I agree with you that we should assess people from close quarters, if possible, discuss with them, ask them questions, because you may be surprised that most people unintentionally do certain things. Unless you clarify, you may actually jump to the wrong conclusion by being a mind reader rather than an analyst. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your contributions and questions. I think our time is fast spent. So we'll quickly just go to a prayer request and close for tonight. Brother Henry, please. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, good evening. It's time for testimonies, prayer requests. So we'll just have it fast because our time is fast.